This is why you should never go on a subway again. So what happened is that one night, a teenage girl was taking the subway home from work back to her house in New York. The scary part is when she went on board, she sat directly across from two men with a woman sitting in the middle. The creepy part is that the woman kept staring at her and wouldn't even blink, while the two men never once looked at her. Well, at the next stop, a man with a trench coat walked in, but the girl didn't pay much attention to him. The girl kept trying to look away so that one lady wouldn't stare at her, but she just kept looking, wouldn't even blink. Well, at the next stop, that random man with the trench coat pulled out the teenage girl and dragged her out of the subway. She was screaming, asking for help because she had no idea why this guy just pulled her out. But the guy told her to calm down and said he actually saved her life because the woman that was staring at her was actually dead, and the two men next to her were holding her up to make her look alive. The random guy with the trench coat said if he didn't pull her out, she was going to be their next victim.
A 6th grade teacher asked her class the other day how many of them were Trump fans. And most of them, not knowing what a Trump fan was and of course wanting to be liked by their teacher, they all raised their hands. Well, all except for little Johnny. The teacher looks over at little Johnny and says, "Johnny, why are you being different again?" And he says, "Well, because I'm not a Trump fan." And she says, "Well, why are you not a Trump fan?" And he says, "Because I'm a Democrat." She says, "Really, why are you a Democrat?" He says, "Well, my mom's a Democrat and my dad's a Democrat, so I'm a Democrat." She says, "Oh, really? Well, what if your mom was a moron and your dad was an idiot? What would that make you?" Johnny smiles and says, "A Trump fan."
This lady's sitting on a couch in the living room. She hears a knock on the door. She gets up, she answers it, and there's a guy standing there. And he goes, "Excuse me, miss, do you have a vagina?" She slams the door. The next morning, she's sitting on the couch, knock on the door, answers it, same guy. "Excuse me, miss, do you have a vagina?" She slams the door. Later that night, her husband comes home from work. He tells her what happened. He goes, "Listen, you know what, honey? I'm going to take off of work tomorrow in case this guy comes back." The next morning, they're sitting on the couch, knock on the door. They both get up and go to the door. The husband says, "All right, listen, I'm going to stand behind the door. If he asks that question again, you say yes. I want to see where he's going with this." She goes, "Okay." She answers the door. Guy says, "Excuse me, miss, do you have a vagina?" And she goes, "Yes, I do." And he goes, "Good. Can you tell your husband to stop using my wife's and start using yours?"
I am going to be telling you the story of the silent twins by the names of June and Jennifer Gibbons. When the girls were toddlers, they barely ever talked, but the pediatrician said that it was common for twins to be behind in communication skills compared to other children. By the time they were in elementary school, they would only say one-word sentences every couple days. Jennifer would write at the level she was supposed to, but June would not. They started to be bullied in school for not talking, which led them to become so quiet they stopped talking to their family. The mother would listen in on them, and she could hear them constantly talking to each other behind closed doors. So they could talk, but the parents said it sounded like a foreign language. They then started walking in a single line with each other. They looked exactly matched up. The feet hitting the ground at the same time, the arms swinging at the same time. They would stand up and sit down at the same time. Each bite of food and each drink would be taken at the same time. They were perfectly mirroring each other in every single movement. Stay tuned for part 2. This is part 2 of the story, The Silent Twins, by the names of June and Jennifer Gibbons. Every movement they made was slow in order to perfectly mirror each other. They would not even leave each other's side to use the bathroom. An actual doctor finally gets involved in the situation when he visits the school to administer tuberculosis shots to all the students. When he gave the shots to the twins, neither of them even showed any reaction to the shot, like they were in a trance. Many doctors and teachers thought that June was being controlled by Jennifer through mind control. One doctor even noted that it looked like June wanted to say something, but Jennifer would glare at her and June would go back to mirroring Jennifer. When they turned 14, they were transferred to a special ed program, but they were still silent. They would not talk. Eventually, therapists made the decision to separate the twins, but the twins hated this idea so much and decided to finally break their silence in order to not be separated. Stay tuned for part 3. This is part 3 of The Silent Twins by the names of June and Jennifer Gibbons. The girls finally broke their silence after their therapist got a call from a payphone that said, quote, "Good evening. Mr. Thomas, this is the twins. We are really sorry about what happened today. If you don't separate us, we'll start talking next week." End quote. So, they could talk. But when the twins got back to school, they acted like the phone call didn't happen. So they decided to send one of the twins away. When they told the twins one of them was going to be sent away, Jennifer screamed and lunged at June and dug her nails into June's cheek. They started attacking each other.